Hello? This is a story about an 18-year-old American girl who mysteriously disappeared after lunch. The police tried to investigate for many years, but to no avail. The case was nearly shelved and became an unsolved mystery. However, almost 30 years later, thanks to the collective efforts of many people, the culprit was finally revealed. The main character of the story is Mandy Stavik, who was 18 years old at the time. She was a cheerful, outgoing girl with a cute, attractive appearance, a round face, and bright, big eyes. Mandy's house was in Whatcom County, Washington. Washington State has a small, beautiful, friendly, and peaceful town called Acme, with a sparse population of less than 300 people. Most of the residents here made a living through farming. The town had long been known as one of the safest places where people didn't even need to lock their doors and could leave their car keys outside without fearing theft because everyone knew each other. Mandy's family hadn't always lived in this town. They moved there as outsiders in 1984. Mandy's mother, Mandy Stavik, brought her children from Alaska to settle here. The reason was that after visiting a friend's home, Mary was impressed by the town's tranquility and peacefulness, so she decided to move her children there to start a new life. Their house was located at the end of the town road, beyond a forest surrounded by lush green trees and a very clean and simple living environment. In addition to taking care of the farm, Mandy's mother also found a job driving a school bus for the local elementary school. Her 3 children were well educated and the family had a stable and happy life. Initially, Mandy had an older brother named Mandy Stavik, but when Mandy was 4 years old, her brother Brent went into a forest with a military base in Anchorage to hunt. After that, Brent never came out of the forest, and when he was found, he had died from 17 gunshot wounds. This case has remained unsolved to this day. Perhaps this was why Mary wanted to leave that sorrowful place and start a new life with her remaining children in Acme. When they moved here, the family quickly adapted to the new environment and had lived there for 5 years. Among the children, the one who stayed home with their mother the most was Mandy. From a young age, she was energetic, active, and loved sports, especially running and horseback riding, which she was very good at. In high school, Mandy joined the school's basketball and softball teams. Additionally, she was a member of the school's band and could play the flute, saxophone, and clarinet. Mandy also had impressive academic achievements. When she graduated, she received the title of Outstanding Graduate Student. With her generous personality and striking appearance, Mandy was very popular at school. In the eyes of her friends, she was a beautiful, excellent, and talented girl, making her an ideal role model for many. In the fall of 1989, Mandy graduated from high school with outstanding academic achievements and was accepted into Central Washington University, opening up a very bright future for this talented young woman. However, no one could have anticipated that the already unfortunate family would have to endure another unexpected tragedy. One day, Mandy suddenly disappeared during a routine jog. November the 24th, 1989. It was a Friday. This was also the first time Mandy came home for the holiday break after starting college. After lunch, Mandy decided to go for a run, one of her favorite daily activities. Usually, Mandy's mother would ride her bike behind her daughter, but that day, Mandy's aunt came over to visit, so her mother stayed home to chat with her sister. Mandy's family lived in a small town where all the neighbors knew each other and life had always been safe. Because of this, Mandy decided to go for a run alone without any concern. Mandy's running route was simple. The journey started from her house, heading west along the river road, to the end of the cul-de-sac, then back. This was a straight road about 2.5 kilometers long. A round trip from her house would be about 5 kilometers, with only a few scattered households along the way. Mandy left the house at 2:30 p.m., wearing a light-colored sports jacket, green sweatpants, blue striped sneakers, and carrying a music player while also taking her German Shepherd dog, Kayla. Mandy was leisurely running along the familiar road listening to music. Time passed quickly and she reached the end of the road and began her way back. While Mandy was jogging, her younger brother Lee was playing at a neighbor's house. Lee looked out the window and saw his sister running back home with Kayla. The neighbor's house was very close to Mandy's house, only a few hundred meters away, so Lee thought his sister would be home soon. At 4:30 p.m., 2 hours had passed since Mandy left the house. Her younger brother had also returned home from the neighbor's house, but there was still no sign of Mandy. Normally, Mandy would have been back long ago, but today she hadn't returned, making her mother, Mary, start to worry. Just then, Mandy's dog Kayla suddenly came home. As soon as she arrived, she hid in a corner in a very unusual manner as if something had happened. However, even after Kayla returned, there was still no sign of Mandy. Sensing something was wrong, Mary immediately called Mandy's boyfriend, Rick Zander. Mary asked, "Did Mandy come to see you?" Rick replied, "Mandy isn't with me. I haven't seen her all day, ma'am." At that moment, her youngest son Lee told his mother that while he was at the neighbor's house, he saw Mandy running back home with Kayla, but it had been a long time ago. The more Mary thought about it, the more she felt something was wrong. Unable to sit still any longer, she decided to call the police and then rushed out to look for her daughter. Mary hurried along Mandy's usual jogging route, calling out her name. Upon hearing the news, the surrounding neighbors also joined in the search. News spread quickly, and soon almost everyone in town knew Mandy was missing. Some people walked, some rode horses, and some drove all-terrain vehicles into the forest where cars couldn't go to look for Mandy. The police also dispatched Border Patrol helicopters for an aerial search and used sniffer dogs to search near Mandy's house. They went door to door in town to see if anyone had seen Mandy, but after a whole day of hard searching, there was still no sign of her. The police came to Mandy's house and wanted to take her dog, Kayla, who had accompanied Mandy outside to help find clues because they thought perhaps the dog knew where Mandy was last seen. However, the strange thing was that since Kayla returned home, she became very timid, scared, and refused to go outside even a step. The police guessed that the dog might have witnessed something terrible which scared her so much. On November 26, 1989, 3 days after Mandy's disappearance, search activities were still ongoing. That afternoon, the search team found a pair of green sweatpants in a forest area, which they believed were the ones Mandy was wearing on the day she went missing. The police then brought the sweatpants to Mary to confirm if they belonged to Mandy. After examining them closely, Mary saw that the pants were dirty and had a tear. Although they looked very similar to the ones Mandy wore that day, Mary ultimately confirmed they were not her daughter's. The sweatpants were then sent to a lab for testing, and the results showed they were unrelated to Mandy. Time passed, and on November 27th, the fourth day since Mandy's disappearance, a search team used a lifeboat to patrol local rivers, hoping to find traces of Mandy. From a distance, a searcher spotted an object floating near a river junction. Upon closer inspection, they discovered it was Mandy. She was floating face down in the water, her body unclothed except for shoes and socks showing no signs of life. No clothes or the music player Mandy took with her were found around. The location where Mandy was discovered was less than 10 kilometers from her home. Upon receiving this news, Mary was utterly devastated. She had already endured the heart-wrenching pain of losing her eldest son, and now her beloved daughter had also been taken from her. Poor Mandy was found in the river, so the police could not initially determine if she had drowned or been murdered. After a day, the autopsy results revealed that Mandy died from drowning and showed signs of assault. The police knew that Mandy had been an excellent swimmer in school and had worked as a part-time lifeguard. Moreover, the water level where Mandy was found only reached an adult's calves, making accidental drowning impossible. The forensic team discovered a bruise on Mandy's head, suggesting she might have been injured, causing her to lose consciousness. Some scratches were also found on her thighs and arms, likely caused by passing through dense bushes. Based on these details, the police concluded that Mandy was attacked while jogging, causing her to be injured and unconscious. The attacker then dragged Mandy through a dense forest to assault her before throwing her into the river. As Mandy was unconscious and unresponsive at the time, she drowned after falling into the water. In the 1980, DNA testing technology was in its infancy and was only performed in certain areas. Detective Peterson, who was in charge of Mandy's case, had just completed a training course from the FBI Academy. With his assistance, the FBI lab successfully extracted a man's DNA from Mandy's body. With the evidence in hand, the police immediately launched an in-depth investigation. The first person the police investigated was Rick Zander, Mandy's boyfriend. Mandy and Rick had shared a sweet time together for over 3 years, but they had also had many conflicts during their relationship. Recently, their relationship seemed to have encountered some problems. The police noted that Rick was very cooperative with their investigation. Upon hearing the news of his girlfriend's death, he was deeply saddened. He expressed, "Although Mandy and I had conflicts before, it was normal for people in a relationship, and there was no deep hatred between us." On the day Mandy disappeared, Rick had a perfect alibi, and after receiving consent, the police took Rick's DNA sample. The DNA results showed that the DNA on Mandy's body did not belong to Rick, and the police finally ruled out any suspicion about him. In the 1980, the Green River Killer case shocked the United States, occurring in the Seattle, Washington area. At the time of Mandy's murder, this case was still unresolved. The location of Mandy's murder was in Whatcom County, 185 kilometers from Seattle, not too far away. Based on some clues found about Mandy and the modus operandi, The police suspected the case might be related to the Green River Killer. The media also began publicizing the discovery of another victim of the Green River Killer. Consequently, local police immediately contacted the team investigating the Green River Killer case. After analyzing the case details, the police ultimately determined that the case was not related to the Green River Killer, and this line of inquiry was cut off. Time passed, and despite having obtained the DNA of the murderer, the case gradually came to a standstill. The DNA testing technology at the time was limited, and there was no database for comparison. Without evidence or a willing sample provider, the police had no right to forcibly obtain DNA from others to find the culprit. Mandy's mother suppressed her pain and continued to accept media interviews to draw more attention to the case. The town's residents also voluntarily raised funds to track down the killer, using the entire $25,000 to support this effort. The donated money was used as a reward for anyone who could provide useful clues. At Mandy's funeral, many of her classmates attended to bid farewell to their beautiful, talented, but short-lived friend. Numerous media outlets covered the incident. Mandy's boyfriend Rick also attended that day. He stood silently before his girlfriend's grave holding a teddy bear that Mandy loved. Despite successfully extracting the killer's DNA, the police had no other evidence and could not identify any further suspects. Thus, the case continued to be a cold case. Time passed, and by 2009, 20 years after Mandy's murder, the killer still had not been found. At this time, a police detective named Kevin Bohe took over the case. He was the third detective to handle Mandy's case and was very interested in the 20-year-old case, making significant efforts to solve it. Under Detective Kevin's direction, the case was reopened. After listening to Mandy's mother describe the case in detail, Detective Kevin noticed points that might have been overlooked. The town had a sparse population, but he believed that despite the low population, it could not rule out the possibility of involvement. Detective Kevin recalled a case in England where a woman was murdered in a sparsely populated village. The police compared the DNA of nearby residents and eventually succeeded in finding the perpetrator. Based on this idea, Detective Kevin returned to the police station, compiled a list of people who lived in the town at that time, and began investigating each person. At the end of the investigation, he would request their DNA samples. However, according to United States law, the police cannot force someone to provide DNA without evidence. They have the right to refuse to provide a DNA sample. Only with the person's consent can it be done. Thus, among the interviewed residents, some agreed to provide DNA samples while others did not. After interviewing more than 100 people, Detective Kevin did not obtain any valuable leads. The investigation lasted several years, but the case still had no breakthrough. In June 2013, two mothers named Heather Backstrom and Mariel Anderson, living near Bellingham, Washington, treated their children by taking them to the Birch Bay Water Park for fun. While chatting, the two accidentally mentioned the case that occurred in Acme Town back then. At that time, the incident was so shocking that almost everyone knew about it. As they chatted, they revealed that they lived near the area where Mandy was murdered, so they were both very familiar with the case. During their conversation, the two women unexpectedly mentioned the same person named Tim Bass. Out of curiosity, they shared with each other their scary encounters with Tim around the time of Mandy's murder. They confided that Tim Bass had behaved inappropriately toward them and that he lived near Mandy's house. This random conversation about the same person made them wonder if it was just a coincidence. The more they thought about it, the more suspicious they became and felt that this clue might be helpful for the case, so they bravely called the police. Upon receiving the report, the police launched an investigation into this lead. They reviewed the case files from back then and discovered that Tim Bass had never been tested for DNA. The police found that Tim Bass's residence was along Mandy's jogging route at that time. Mandy's younger brother mentioned seeing her running home, and it wasn't far from their house, which is why the police did not suspect Tim Bass back then. According to investigations, in January 1990, just 2 months after Mandy's case, Tim Bass married his girlfriend and left Acme. He was 2 years older than Mandy and attended the same high school as her. He currently lived in Everson, Washington with his wife, 3 children, and worked as a truck driver. Neighbors described Tim as a slightly gloomy, quiet person with odd behaviors. He had no criminal record and nothing suspicious in his background. After gathering information, the police decided to meet him. Investigators went to Tim's current residence to ask him about Mandy. Surprisingly, Tim claimed he couldn't remember anything about Mandy until prompted by the police, after which he remembered a little. This unusual behavior made the investigators very suspicious, considering that Mandy's case was famous in the town and his house was very close to Mandy's. Mandy often jogged past his house, so how could he forget? Not wanting to waste time, the police directly asked Tim a crucial question. Would you agree to provide a DNA sample? Tim firmly replied, I refuse your request. I don't trust the police. Tim's response made the police sense that they were close to solving the case, but they encountered another difficulty. Without evidence, the police could not forcibly obtain Tim's DNA sample, and illegally obtained evidence would be declared invalid. Tim was a driver for a bakery, and the police approached his manager, Kim Wagner. They explained that they were investigating an employee in her company and hoped she could provide the driver's route so they could monitor and collect some cigarette butts or other items containing DNA. However, Kim felt this might invade personal privacy and refused the police's request. But later, certain events changed Kim's mind. In 2015, 26 years after Mandy's case and 2 years after the police targeted Tim Bass as a suspect, the police had repeatedly requested Tim to voluntarily provide a DNA sample, but he consistently refused. That year, the bakery manager Kim, during a conversation with a friend, learned about the case and changed her decision. One day, Kim was chatting with a friend at a bar when the friend mentioned Mandy's case. Kim's friend recounted that an employee in her company named Tim Bass used to live in the same area as Mandy and that his house was on Mandy's jogging route when she disappeared. Kim was stunned to realize that the person the police had been tirelessly trying to reach for the past 2 years was indeed Tim Bass. From then on, Kim began paying more attention to Tim. She noticed that he never handed in his uniform for company laundry and even took all his trash home as if he were hiding something. In 2017, when the police visited Kim's office once again, she proactively provided Tim's delivery route to fully support the police investigation. Knowing Tim's travel route, the police began monitoring and investigating him more rigorously. However, Tim was very shrewd and always on high alert, never smoking or drinking, always wearing gloves while driving and taking his trash home to dispose of it, preventing the police from obtaining his DNA samples. Fortunately, Kim volunteered to help the police catch Tim. She expressed, "When I was 19, Mandy's incident happened. I was just a year older than her. I was working part-time at a small company in town when the incident occurred. This was the first time I felt the murder was so close to me, and it was also the first time I feared for my own safety, knowing the killer was nearby every day. Now, as a mother, I can understand the feelings and pain of Mandy's mother. If my daughter faced such a tragedy, I would also hope someone would help me. In this case, I will do my best to cooperate." The police felt full of hope after hearing Kim's words. From that point on, Kim began closely monitoring Tim's behavior, and fortunately, if Kim voluntarily offered help and provided Tim's DNA, the evidence would be legally valid. On August the 10th, 2017, an important day arrived. Bakery manager Kim saw Tim take a disposable cup from the water cooler to drink. After drinking, he threw the cup straight into the trash. Kim looked into the trash bin, her heart pounding with excitement. After he left, she quickly retrieved the cup, placed it in her desk drawer, and immediately informed the police. After receiving the message, Detective Kevin was thrilled and quickly collected the evidence, sending it to the lab for DNA testing. A few days later, the DNA test results showed that the DNA found on Mandy's body perfectly matched Tim Bass's DNA. With the long-awaited results, Detective Kevin and all the officers on the task force were overjoyed because they had finally solved the 28-year-old case. Mandy's killer had finally been revealed. On December 10th, 2017, the police arrested Tim Bass on charges of first-degree murder. During the interrogation, he remained unusually calm. When he learned that the police had obtained his DNA, he arrogantly responded, "I took every careful measure to ensure you wouldn't get my DNA. How did this happen? Where did I go wrong?" Tim denied killing Mandy and asserted, "Mandy and I met in a chance encounter and gradually became secret lovers. My father knew about this relationship." On November 23rd, a day before Mandy was murdered, it was Thanksgiving, and we were together after Mandy came home from school. That's why my DNA was found on Mandy. However, Tim's father, the only person who could verify these claims, had passed away. Mandy's sister also expressed, "There's no way my sister had any romantic or physical relationship with Tim. Frankly, he wasn't good enough for Mandy." On October 24th, 2019, the case officially went to trial. During the trial, Tim Bass refused to plead guilty, maintaining his innocence, and claimed he was with his wife on the day of the murder and that his wife could testify. However, this claim was quickly debunked by the prosecution's witness, none other than Tim's wife, Gina Malone. When Mandy's incident happened, Gina was his girlfriend. She testified in court, "I did not see Tim all day on the day of the incident." She added, 2 years ago in 2017, when the police came to investigate, my husband asked me to provide him with an alibi by falsely claiming that we were together that day. He also asked me to lie that I saw Mandy jogging that day, but in reality, I wasn't there. She continued, my husband is a misogynist who enjoys watching true crime shows. Once he bragged that if it were him, he would never be stupid enough to get caught and would easily avoid suspicion. The reason I wanted to expose him was that I couldn't endure his abusive behavior toward me and our children anymore. Another key witness at the trial was Tom Bass, Tim's younger brother. Tom said Tim was very worried when investigators asked me to provide a DNA sample. He was anxious because DNA between two siblings is highly similar. If my DNA were tested, the police would know that the perpetrator was a family member. Tom revealed the truth. My brother asked me to lie and claim that I also had a physical relationship with Mandy to paint her as promiscuous, thus lending credibility to his story. However, as Mandy's friend, I refused to lie for my brother and chose to testify for the prosecution. Faced with indisputable evidence, the jury quickly reached a consensus, and the court sentenced Tim Bass to 27 years in prison for kidnapping, rape, and murder. This was the highest sentence a judge could impose since Washington state abolished the death penalty in 2018. After the sentencing, Tim Bass tried to justify himself, saying, "First, I want to say that I am 100% innocent of this crime. I do not wish ill will upon anyone here, including today, but I am struggling with this. For Mandy's family, after 30 years of waiting, justice was finally served. And on Mrs. Mary's 81st birthday, Mandy's mother, the murderer of her daughter, was finally brought to light. Mrs. Mary had lost both her son and daughter, and her life had always been filled with misfortune. At this moment, her eyes welled up with tears. She felt this was the best birthday gift of her life. The elderly mother felt a sense of relief and peace, as she always lived with hope and continued to live strong. Mandy still lives in her heart and will never leave. Finally, she can rest in eternal peace in the afterlife." The case that occurred at West Cheng Market today is a noteworthy incident. This is a wholesale market specializing in the trade of fruits and vegetables, where there are many immigrants from other localities who have come to live and run small businesses. Since the majority of the residents here have modest living standards, the security situation in this area is rather complex, with frequent occurrences of theft and robbery. However, in 2013, an exceptionally serious murder case took place here, causing a stir in the entire market and sparking much discussion for a long time. The story begins on the early morning of December 25th, 2013 in the lunar calendar, which is just 5 days away from the Lunar New Year, with temperatures at 0 degrees Celsius and heavy snowfall. Mr. Chu, a vegetable delivery man, came to West Cheng Market to transport goods for his brother. After completing his work, he felt abdominal pain and urgently needed to use the restroom. However, as the market was in its peak period during the days leading up to the new year, the public restroom was very crowded, and Mr. Chu was unable to squeeze in. Looking around, he spotted an old deserted house in the distance and decided to head in that direction and climb through the window to go inside. After taking care of his personal needs, Mr. Chu noticed 2 sacks in the corner of the room, one yellow and one white, standing upright with an unclear contents. Curious, he approached and carefully opened them to see what was inside. As he pressed into the sacks, he felt something slightly tapered, long, and quite solid. He speculated that it could be a radish, or some New Year's item that had been stolen and temporarily hidden there by a thief. Mr. Chu cautiously opened the mouth of the sack to check, but as soon as he opened the sack, he was shocked and terrified to find 2 human arms inside. Suddenly, after a moment of panic, he quickly ran out of the abandoned house and reported it to the police. After receiving the police report, the police quickly arrived at the scene, which was a residential area with many tile-roofed houses and makeshift rented rooms. However, this case was more serious than the petty thefts that often occur in the area. A preliminary forensic examination showed that 2 sacks contained the body parts of a woman around 40 years old, but the head was missing. The victim had been killed about 8 days before the body was discovered, but due to the cold weather, the body was relatively well preserved and had not begun to decompose. On the 25th of the 12th lunar month, the headless body of a woman was discovered in an abandoned house in the West Cheng Market area, and the time of the victim's death was estimated to be between the 17th and 18th of the 12th lunar month. At the scene, the police did not find anything that could identify the victim. Without the head and no phone or personal documents, identifying the body became extremely difficult. This area has a high immigrant population of around 80%, with migrant workers renting rooms to live and work, and only 20% being local residents. At this time, many migrant workers had returned to their hometowns for the Lunar New Year, leaving many houses and the market area deserted. The police analyzed that the initial crime scene may not have been where the murder took place, but rather where the killer dumped the body. The house where the body was found was far from the market and deep in an alley, making the police suspect that the perpetrator may not have been from this area and did not frequent it regularly. To find clues, the police have distributed 3,000 bulletins to residents in the area and publicly posted on the media, in the hope of gathering more information about the case. On the second day after the incident was discovered, a team of investigators found a black nylon bag containing a set of clothes with bloodstains. In the nylon bag, they found a handmade long-sleeve striped blue and white shirt, a gray striped men's pants, and a red scarf. At the bottom of the bag, there was packaging of a used sauerkraut pickle pack, with only the green packaging remaining. DNA test results showed that the bloodstains on the clothes, in the nylon bag, and the body in the 2 sacks at the abandoned house were from the same person. However, the fingerprints on the nylon bag did not match anyone in the national database. The discovery of the nylon bag containing the victim's bloodstained clothes not far from where the body was dumped suggests a high likelihood that the suspect is male and that both the perpetrator and the victim live near the West Cheng market area. The police drew a straight line connecting these 2 points, took the line as the diameter, and drew a circle, believing that the initial crime scene would be within this area. In addition to the clothes in the nylon bag, there was packaging of a local brand sauerkraut pickle pack. The police believe this will be an important clue to solve the case through the eating habits of people from northern China who commonly eat sauerkraut pickles in the winter. After receiving information from the police about the case, the owner of a small grocery store in the area provided some important details. She said that the batch of sauerkraut pickles was purchased by the store on December 17th of the lunar calendar, after being produced on December 16th of the lunar calendar. She recalled that on the late evening of December 18th, a woman around 40 years old with dyed brown hair and about 1.6 meters tall bought 2 bags of sauerkraut pickles at the store. Although this is a grocery store with many customers and many types of goods, the owner still remembered this detail because it was a special incident. That is also the slightly idealistic notion of business people. When they import a new commodity, they will believe that the first buyer is the one who decides the fate of the entire shipment. That is why the store owner still clearly remembers the first woman who came to buy 2 packages of pickled mustard greens at 2.5 yuan per package. Typically, local women would pickle cabbage at home, while if they were temporary residents, they would usually buy pre-pickled cabbage to eat, so the police thought the victim might be someone from elsewhere who had come to rent temporary accommodation in the area. The production date printed on the package of cabbage pickles was January 26th, which is December 16th on the lunar calendar. So the police began investigating the stores or grocery stores in the area that sold that type of pickled cabbage. After she made the purchase and left the store, her scarf got caught on a nail near the door, and the owner still had a clear impression of her wearing a long scarf. When the woman left, the owner went outside and closed the shop and saw her turn into the small alley just a few meters to the left of the store. This was the alley that led to the abandoned house, where the headless body of the woman was later found. The fact that the woman bought the pickled cabbage on the exact day that the forensics determined the victim's time of death at the abandoned house led the police to strongly suspect that she was the murdered woman. Based on the characteristics of the surrounding area, the police analyzed that this alley was very dark at night and was most likely the only route for the victim to get home, and she may have been robbed or had an accident that day. According to the store owner, the woman who came to buy the cabbage that day was the girlfriend of a man named Yu Guo, who worked as a truck driver at the vegetable market. The store owner also owns a small inn just a few hundred meters away, which is managed by her husband. She had seen the woman a few times coming to their inn with a man named Yu Guo. The police believed this woman was Yu Guo's girlfriend, so they focused their investigation on Yu Guo to try to identify the woman. When you visit the boarding house of Yu Guo, your roommate tells you that Yu Guo has returned to his hometown in Sichuan to celebrate the Lunar New Year with his family, as he has to work far away from his hometown, thousands of kilometers away. The police returned to the store and showed the store owner a photo of a red scarf and a set of blood-stained men's clothing found in a plastic bag. But the store owner says the woman who bought the cabbage that day was wearing a brownish-yellow scarf, not red. She also doesn't know who the owner of that clothing might be. Later, the police contact Yu Guo through his roommate, and he says his girlfriend's name is Liu Yan, and she has also returned to her hometown in Baotou, Inner Mongolia, which is not far from Chifeng. When the police go there, they find and meet Liu Yan, but this girl is under 30, much younger than the 40-year-old victim at the scene. Furthermore, she says she doesn't like salted pickled cabbage and has never bought any pickled cabbage packages, so the store owner might have mistaken her for someone else. The police go to the store again and ask the owner if she might have mistaken the cabbage-buying girl for someone else or if she knows anyone with a similar appearance. The owner insists that it couldn't have been a mistake as that girl is Yu Guo's girlfriend. She explains that she has seen the girl with Yu Guo at the small inn her husband manages many times, and Yu Guo still owes rent that they've asked him to pay. The police contact Yu Guo again to ask about the 40-year-old woman, and Yu Guo admits that she is not his current girlfriend but rather a financial relationship. He only knows her as Yu Ran but is not sure if that is her real name or a stage name. After checking the telecommunications records, they were able to identify the real name of the woman as Yu Ran, 45 years old, who was married and lived alone in a boarding house near the market, rarely going back to her hometown. The neighbors said they last saw Yu Ran on January 28th, and then she disappeared without a trace. Everyone thought Yu Ran had gone back to her hometown to celebrate the Lunar New Year, and they also confirmed that Yu Ran really liked to eat pickled cabbage, and she also often wrapped a long red scarf around her neck to keep warm. Based on this information, the police determined it was highly likely that Yu Ran was the victim of a homicide. When checking the last phone numbers contacted by Yu Ran, most of them were her clients. After extensively investigating her relationships, the police found a man named Chen Yu Mao who had a romantic relationship with Yu Ran. The police immediately tried to find Chen Yu Mao for questioning, but he had hastily left his boarding room and disappeared without a trace, even leaving behind his pets, a dog and a cat. Chen Yu Mao's job was to load and unload vegetables at the market, and his hometown was Luokan, about 50 kilometers from Chifeng. He had a motorcycle to get around, so why would he have rushed back to his hometown for the Lunar New Year like that? On the morning of February 7th, the third day after the body was discovered, the police asked the boarding house owner to open Chen Yu Mao's room for a search. This was a rather dilapidated boarding house built with bricks, with walls that had not been plastered with cement. A gray metal gate led to a small 3-meter courtyard which was full of miscellaneous items like a few flower pots. When entering the house, the room on the immediate left was a table full of pots, bowls, and other cooking utensils, with the middle of the house in disarray with curtains. Continuing further inside, the police found a large handprint-sized mark on the wall that appeared relatively fresh, likely from an impact. Around it were some dark brown stains resembling dried blood. On the floor there was a hammer, a chisel, a saw, and a pair of white rubber gloves placed on the table. On other objects in the house, such as a thermos and some iron bed frames, there were also many speckled stains resembling splattered blood. When questioned by the police, the landlord revealed that Chen Yu Mao had left the lodging on February 5th. The same day, the entire lodging was abuzz with the discovery of a woman's body. After comparing the blood traces found in Chen Yu Mao's room with the victim's DNA, the results showed they belonged to the same person, confirming the room as the initial crime scene. This scene was about 60 meters away from where the body was disposed of and about 70 meters from where the blood-stained clothes were found, completely consistent with the police's prior investigation scope. On the afternoon of February 7th, the police in Chifeng collaborated with the police in Luokan to apprehend Chen Yu Mao in his hometown. When interrogated, Chen Yu Mao quickly confessed to the murder and revealed the location where he had discarded the victim's head. The place where he disposed of the victim's head was an abandoned residential area about 5 kilometers south of his lodging. Here, the police also found the victim's shoes, jacket, and short dress in a different grassy area. Chen Yu Mao, age 47, was married with children back in his hometown. In the past, he had been sentenced to 12 years in prison for involvement in a human trafficking ring. After his release, Chen Yu Mao could not reintegrate into the community and could not find local work, so he came to the West Cheng food market in Chifeng City to work as a porter. Yu Ran, age 45, was the victim in the case related to Chen Yu Mao. She had left her hometown years ago and was living here doing sensitive work to make a living. As they were both far from their hometowns, Chen Yu Mao and Yu Ran had developed an emotional relationship, although it was essentially one based on his need for money and her need for companionship. Chen Yu Mao would usually give Yu Ran 200 to 300 yuan each time they were together. Although his porter work only brought in about 2,000 yuan per month over 2 years, Chen Yu Mao had earned over 50,000 yuan from porting, most of which he had given to Yu Ran. However, Chen Yu Mao gradually felt that Yu Ran was only concerned with getting his money and did not truly care about him. Chen Yu Mao wanted to end this relationship and had stopped responding to her messages and calls, which was also recorded in the telecommunications history between the two. On the evening of January 28th, 2013, Yu-ran went to the grocery store at the end of the alley to buy 2 bags of pickled cabbage. This proves that she was still in contact with many other men, including Yu Guo, and not just Chen Yumao. One day near the Lunar New Year, the grocery store owner realized that Yu-ran could be Yu Guo's girlfriend when she wore a black jacket, short skirt, and red stockings. However, the store owner had mistaken Yu-ran's scarf to be beige instead of red. After buying some food, Yu-ran walked back to Chen Yumao's rented room. She took the initiative to reconcile with him and said that since it was near the Lunar New Year, Chen Yumao was about to go home to his wife and children, so she just wanted to have one more meal with him. After the meal, Yu-ran confided that she had a matter she wanted to borrow from Chen Yumao, about 50,000 yuan. However, Chen Yumao had already given most of his money to Yu-ran over the 2 years of working, so now he had no money left to take home for the Lunar New Year. Yu-ran did not believe this and thought that Chen Yumao must have saved up some money before going home. As a result, the two began to argue fiercely, but perhaps because they had had a little alcohol during the meal, the shoving and struggle eventually led to Chen Yumao pushing Yu-ran, causing her to hit her head against the wall and suffer a large laceration that continued to bleed. After a while, seeing that Yu-ran had died, Chen Yumao used an axe to dispose of the body. On a cold and quiet night, the perpetrator carefully transported the victim's body. But afraid that the sound of the motorcycle could attract the attention of the neighbors, he divided the body into 2 bags and carried each bag on foot to an abandoned house a few dozen meters away to dispose of it. After returning to his room, he carefully removed the bloodied clothes and items, wrapping them in black plastic bags. However, he failed to notice that the packaging of the pickled cabbage that the two had eaten for dinner was still in the trash bag, becoming an important piece of evidence for the police during the investigation. The victim's head he carefully wrapped in a yellow plastic bag and threw it further away, along with Yu-ran's shoes and clothes, in an attempt to conceal the identity. After hearing the news that a headless body had been found in the abandoned house, he hastily fled and returned to his hometown. This was likely a tragic case involving both love and money between a socially ostracized worker and a recidivist. The two individuals only happened to cross paths briefly in life, but ended up escorting each other to the end because they could not control their own improper needs. The story begins with the good intentions of the individuals, but in the process of carrying them out, they became embroiled in other needs such as emotions, physiology, and finances. These needs caused them to fall into uncontrollable relationships, leading to severe consequences. For the perpetrator, he not only committed the crime and was convicted, but he could not even bring the money home to support his family. The victim, on the other hand, lost his life in a painful and brutal manner. Almost everyone has been taught and understands unethical behaviors, but psychological needs and financial ambitions make them willing to make the trade-off. Only those who have fallen into this vortex can truly feel the difficulty of resisting and the powerful attraction of it. Sometimes the lives of the people around us are in difficulties because they have already entangled themselves in complex and wrong relationships. They cannot move forward or retreat and are trapped in a relationship that cannot develop. In this case, one side wants to end it, while the other side does not agree because it involves emotions or financial interests. In addition, illegal or vicious activities also bring many unforeseeable risks because they have to be stealthily avoided the judgment of society and the law. That is why people always advise avoiding improper relationships and illegal activities to ensure personal safety. What are your thoughts on the case today? Please leave a comment below so that we can discuss together. If you find it interesting, don't hesitate to leave a like and subscribe to the channel to support us. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.